I'm Vineet Jain. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Ignite. And today I'll be presenting our view of how the cloud storage market is evolving, specifically in light of adoption of cloud storage solutions by businesses. Here's my view of the cloud storage market evolution. As you can see, in the beginning, I would say around 6 to 7 years back, the cloud market has been pretty much saturated with and fairly successful companies where the cloud has been used for offline storage, more for archival and backup. Classical examples of companies which have been very successful in this space is Mozy, Carbonite, and companies of that sort. Then after that, we see an advent of companies using the cloud for more ad hoc collaboration, where you can upload large files, generate a link, send it to whoever you're sharing it with. And companies in this space, have been around for a few years now. It's companies like YouSendIt, DropSend, and companies of that sort. In the last three and a half years, you're seeing, because of the technology on the back end getting cheaper in terms of implementation, storage, of course, becoming a commodity product, there's been a spate of online storage collaboration companies in this space, some fairly successful, at least from the name recognition point of view, or wide adoption. On the consumer side, you see a very successful company called Dropbox. Then, of course, you see companies which have a lot of market recognition, companies like Box.net, and of course, there's a spate of other companies like ShareFile, Files Anywhere. I can name almost 20 more. The view of Ignite in this space is that, truly speaking, for real businesses, addressing the ground realities of the cloud, the world, specifically for cloud storage, has to be hybrid, where there's no escaping the fact that you need an on-prem component in conjunction with what you have in the cloud, and that's why the word hybrid. And that's what we mean as that this is the real-world solution for businesses. Now, what exactly I mean by this is, let me go further to say, already everyone here understands the value of the cloud, the elasticity, the access anywhere, and of course the whole CapEx to OpEx conversion. Storage as a commodity is a fundamental need that every business has, but the hardest nut to crack has been cloud storage for businesses. Why so? For the following reasons. Number one problem with a cloud-based solution, specifically for something where you store all your important company data, is security. Basically, we are coming in, providers like us coming in and saying something that you've run traditionally behind your firewall in your data centers is now being put in the cloud, and therefore you can trust the security model. And it's not just security in terms of data encryption, access encryption, can I control who sees what kind of stuff, but also very fundamental needs like I'm a 200 to 500 person company, and how can I centrally manage my employees' username passwords from one system, whether they are living in the cloud or whether they're working on-premise? The second big technical challenge has been performance. Fundamentally, something which is run in your firewall or in your local area network at speeds of 100 Mbps or higher is now being put into the public cloud. And keep in mind, we're talking about not Fortune 1000, 5000 class of customers, but a lot of SMEs, small, medium enterprises, who don't have a dedicated line to your data center. They're going through the public internet. So how do you give them commensurate performance when the point of reference for something in the past has been something running in the local area network? A simple example, I have a high-res corporate video. Let's say it's a 20-minute video, a 200 gigabyte file. How do I share that with one of my remote offices? And last but not the least is the most fundamental psychological problem or a perception issue of, hey, I'm losing control of my data. Something which traditionally I could sort of touch it, the servers in my firewall, behind my firewall, servers in my data center. Now I'm putting this into the cloud. So how do I make the cloud more tangible? And also, there's another issue associated with this to say, what happens if there's no internet connectivity? And I mean it not just my sales guy on a plane, but also, let's say my remote office, one of my local offices in LA, they lost connectivity for a few minutes. In the middle of the day, they are totally toast. They cannot access their files. Now, contrast it with line of business applications like Salesforce and NetSuite. If you don't have access for 1 or 2 minutes, it's not going to completely kill you. I mean, of course, there'll be an impact. But the impact of not having access to your corporate files for even a short duration can have a huge detrimental effect to your business. So addressing these 3 core problems, security, performance, and addressing the offline access issue and, of course, the perception issue are fundamental to building a cloud storage for businesses. Now, let's look at the core problem. The core problem is you have in the past used physical file servers, no matter what size of the company is. You have to deploy not just the hardware in terms of the server and the server software. You need other peripherals. For example, you need a VPN capability for remote access. You need tape-based backup or some kind of backup for disaster recovery. And quite frankly, this architecture is not designed for intra-office collaboration. That is being able to bring in your consultants, your vendors, and share documents with them collaboratively and work on projects. So this problem is fundamentally what Ignite has tried to solve. And essentially we are saying that replace all of this, that physical file server, with something in the cloud. And essentially, in one solution, not only do you reach feature parity with what you're able to do in the traditional past, but go beyond what you're capable of doing with the physical file server. A very simple example to illustrate my point is, let's say in your marketing department, you have 15 people, and they're touching the same file at different periods of time. Now, typically, companies will use some nomenclature, some naming convention to track the changes on files. You know, people will put their name initials, some date, time stamp, but it's quite a difficult challenge. As this thing spreads, you will see 20 different versions of the same file, and sometimes the only way to reconcile, to say what's the latest one, is based on the timestamp. In Ignite, for example, you pretty much work off the same file name. Now, whoever's got the file open at that time implicitly places a lock on the file. And as other people try to access it, they'll get it in a read-only mode. Once the file has been modified with this particular by this particular person and saved, a new version will result. Now, this new version will be immediately made available to everyone else in that ecosystem, whoever's got access to that folder. And of course, they'll be notified and stuff like that. So this is a simple example of saying, how can you build a cloud-based substitution for what you traditionally have run in-house and do a lot more? In terms of the core capability, basically the way we see the world is you give people one integrated solution for storage, that being the backbone, sort of a means to an end. Extend the storage layer for collaboration within your employee base and outside. And also do recognize that despite a corporate file server, there's a lot of critical digital assets that the company has which are residing on your employees' laptops, and you need to protect them. So the ability to also back up those into the cloud file server is part of the solution. Essentially, it's a pure infrastructure replacement for which you'd had to buy a lot of hardware, buy different pieces of software, and cobble it together. Now, with that said, I'm going to go into my favorite part of, I like this slide simply because almost 3 years back when we started building this product, we knew from day one that a pure cloud-based solution for something as data-intensive as a cloud file server will have fundamental challenges, and that's why I'm bursting this cloud balloon, because I believe there's a lot of hype about the cloud. And in very simple speak, the challenges are manifested in no particular order for the following reasons. Number one problem, in fact, to me, that's the most significant problem, and as I had briefly touched upon in my initial slides, was people's perception of losing control. I need a local copy of my data. I want to make sure that I can access my data no matter what. This goes beyond, just an offline access problem. There are also a lot of industries where this is a compliance issue, especially in financial services side. Then, of course, there's the fundamental technical problems, the latency and offline access. And then there are certain local apps which, if they have a backend which is file system based, you could not successfully be able to run them purely on a cloud-based solution? The answer to all of these issues has been an adjunct product that we have built. And of course, we gave it the name of a local cloud. I know it's an oxymoron, but quite interestingly, it actually gets people's interest to say, so what do you mean by this? What's a local cloud? And again, not to go into too much of marketing bloviation here, basically the view of our world is that you get not just the elasticity, the access anywhere, the whole advantages of a pure cloud-based platform, but you also couple that with an on-prem component, which we call as the local cloud, which overcomes the challenges that I had listed earlier. And quite frankly, it is, in my parlance, a reverse backup. What you have in the cloud, you have it locally available. And then there are multiple ways on what is locally available. There are companies which will give you a cloud gateway. There are companies like us who will basically say, you don't need to just have a local cache because the amount of storage you need, especially from a small, medium enterprise point of view, doesn't really go beyond 4 to 8 terabytes or even, let's say, 24, 25 terabytes. And with commodity hardware so much cheaper, we can replicate the entire data set for you or subsets depending on your configuration. But the fundamental architecture is now evolving where the world of what's in the cloud and what's local coalesce into one seamless solution, and that's what we call as hybrid. But the fundamental user behavior, which is paramount for a successful adoption of any such solution, is users don't care where my file is. They don't care what your backend file system is. They don't care what kind of deduping you have. They don't care what compression you have in the backend. That is all implementation. Users basically care about accessing their files, and this architecture, whether your user is sitting in the office, whether they are in a home office or traveling on the road, they can access the files seamlessly. That is the fundamental beauty of this architecture, that the user essentially has this mapped, let's say, as a Z drive on their desktop. If they're using the drive mapping, of course, they have the browser-based access, they have the mobile access and all that stuff. But assuming they're coming straight off the desktop, the Z drive that they have can resolve into local access, assuming you have something locally deployed. If you don't, or if you're traveling, it will go straight into the cloud. Keeping the two worlds in sync is part of the software's responsibility. And this is a pretty hard nut to crack as well. But before I go into a little bit more details, let's answer the question, so how do I deploy this local cloud? Now, do we provide an appliance? Does a software company, build its own pizza box with all its special needs? The answer is probably no, simply because there's a lot of commodity hardware available. And in terms of, classes of hardware available, the best hardware available is your computer hard drive. And, essentially this is where your local data is available on the hard drive. It's replicated bidirectionally between the cloud and you. And this is an example, where a very successful development has been a company like Dropbox. In our view, this is a solution that is meant for single users or maybe very small teams, but it really cannot scale for a company of, let's say, even 10 people, forget about 100 people or 1,000 people. The next evolution of this product from our point of view was, let's look at small, medium hardware platforms which are easy to deploy, and they come in the guise of commercial NAS devices, let's say devices from Netgear, whether they are desktop mounted or they are rack mounted. But Ignite, essentially, you can deploy the local cloud software, the Ignite local cloud software, on such commercial devices and transform this dumb storage, this NAS device, into a full-fledged file server. In this solution, not only is the data being replicated, but also your access control layer is being replicated. Here's a simple example. Let's say in your marketing folder, under marketing, there's a subfolder called Internet Marketing. Within that, there's a subfolder called Collateral for Internet Marketing. Now, let's say I have read-only access on that particular subfolder. Ignite will ensure whether I access this in the cloud or I access this locally off this device, it will be the same access layer. If I make a change, I being the administrator of the Ignite account, the change will be replicated in near real-time or near instantaneous time in terms of access control layer, because keep in mind, we have to now go and change the echoes, as we call them, onto the local file system quite rapidly, simultaneous with people actually using the box. Now, with this solution, there is a problem that a company will have to buy a specific manufacturer's device, in this case, for example, Netgear. So how do I get this capability, I being a business which is, let's say, already having some other NAS devices, or I have existing servers, my sunk investment with a lot of direct attached storage? The answer to that problem is you can now deploy this. We call it the enterprise local cloud. You can deploy this as a VMware-based virtual appliance. So whether you use VMware Workstation, imagine that this server is a shared resource, or a bare metal deployment with ESX, we will convert this piece of hardware you have into a local cloud by deploying a software layer which will essentially repurpose this piece of hardware and have it become part of your cloud-based ecosystem. So a customer now has a choice of going all the way from a small 1 to 5 person team to, let's say, 15 to 200 person team to somebody in thousands, and be able to get the advantages of the cloud well integrated without worrying about where is my data being served from. Finally, let's look at, and here's a shameless plug for my company. So what is Ignite actually doing for a customer? The number one, in fact, the highest proportion of our customer base is using Ignite as a typical file server replacement. I'll give you an example of one of our customers. It's a company based in the UK. They have, it's a pretty decent sized company, around £3 billion worth of run rate. And they have 210 users on Ignite, out of which they have 3 locations in London, in Bath, and in Aberdeen. And essentially they have their entire company on Ignite. And interestingly, they have 3 local clouds deployed in each of these offices, actually on Netgear devices, because they want super fast access for their employees when they're within the office confines. And when the same employees are working from home or some remote workers, they can still access the data from the cloud. Another good example is a company based in San Francisco. They were looking for replacing an existing file server which had outrun its usefulness, and they were looking to upgrade. They initially had 200 employees that needed to access all the data. So the choices were buy a much higher configuration Dell server, that's what they were looking at, or in this particular case, they decided to deploy Ignite, the cloud solution, and for some employees who are finance users with their Excel spreadsheets being very large, they needed latency issues to be addressed adequately in the San Francisco office, so they deployed one office local cloud. And now they are able to run their entire operation where the cost differential for them, quite frankly, and this is not any marketing, I'm not overhyping the value, they would have been paying on an annualized basis something close to around $30,000. They pay us $1,200 a month, and they're essentially getting all of this, plus the same thing has been deployed in their London office, in their New York office, all within the same cost range. So this is the number one usage for Ignite, which is it's a file server replacement. The other big solution deployment that's happening with hybrid cloud being sort of the reference point is now you can deploy multiple local clouds across different offices and use the cloud as one logical namespace, very similar to what you would typically do with a very expensive and very hard to maintain Microsoft distributed file system. This is only possible because of the hybrid cloud solution. Now, in both of these cases, because of the richness of the application, we are able to take the entire IT dollars that they have allocated for storage, for collaboration, for backup, and a bunch of other things. And the third and the smaller part of our customer adoption is, where people will use us in conjunction with what they have. They may have physical file servers, they may have other things, and they will basically put Ignite on the side for outbound collaboration, which I call as customer collaboration, basically simple speak file sharing. So that typically has been sort of the 3 main areas where a solution has resonated. But the hybrid, in my point of view, is fundamental for the file server replacement use case as well as cross-office collaboration. Finally, this comes to my main point. Cloud storage for business is a very hard problem to crack, and the fundamental problems people have associated with why or what to do here goes beyond just simple technology, the technology limitations being, of course, latency and offline access. But the third big part, which is still the biggest inhibitor from companies, specifically large companies jumping into the cloud on a wholesale basis, of course, some departments will use solutions like Ignite all the time, is the perception that I'm losing control of my data and I need a local copy, or some elements of my critical files available locally for either comfort or compliance reasons. So this pretty much brings my presentation to a close. I'd be happy to take any questions. Okay, I see a few questions here. So there's a question from Henry. Henry, I'll be more than happy to. By the way, I've had some conversations with your folks in Boston. But yeah, I'll be more than happy to share the slide deck with you. I see a question from Anil. Do you synchronize reverse views? Anil, can you explain the question to me a little bit better, please? Let's see. I'm trying to reply to Anil. And I'm not sure if I'm able to send my answer. Anil, basically in terms of replication, you can set it up to sync real time, or you can set it up to sync asynchronously. So you have the option as the administrator in the local cloud console to set up those options.
So other than real time, you can say asynchronous can happen, every 2 hours, every 15 minutes, or you can, assuming depending on, how you are actually accessing both the cloud and local, you can set it up to run the synchronization at a specific time period, let's say midnight to 4 a.m., where your network bandwidth is not being highly used. So the choices are available to you. Question is, so how does the solution log files in the cloud to avoid conflicts if one user is editing it? If you are accessing the files in the cloud, then of course the minute somebody's opened it, the lock is placed. Now interestingly, if you are working off a local copy, right now we do not propagate or do an optimistic lock in the cloud because the whole idea of the local cloud was for offline access. But currently we are working on giving an option to say, do you want to try this optimistic locking, and we will do a lock propagation. So basically that choice is being added, but right now in the case of if you worked on a file locally, assuming you did deploy the local cloud, the only way for us to detect the changes, we'll end up creating a couple of versions of the file or multiple versions in the cloud, so no changes are being lost, whether you're working on it locally or somebody's working in the cloud. But whoever saved it the last, their version will show up on the top. That's how it currently is handled. Okay, so I think it's time to wrap up. Thank you all. Thanks for your time. Really appreciate the opportunity. Bye-bye.